agree.
Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Could I just say thank you to Councillor Potts, who I think chaired one meeting, is that right, of this before? Anyway, let's move straight on to the agenda. Our first item, apart from the appointment of the chairman, the second item then is the minutes of the last meeting. There are one or two items arising. In particular, we asked for a feedback on Brightwells and the income that is going to or has already arisen from that. I think that is circulated to you, and I think you might have some comments on that, please.
Sure, Councillor.
Peter?
So there's an estimate. So there's two columns on the document circulated. There's the original agreement as of May 16, and it's been updated as of August 19. You can see the total capital. There's a very slight reduction in receipt there, and that's probably down to the fact that the stamp duty is higher than was anticipated. You can see from the second row down, sorry. Apart from that, there's other one-offs. There isn't a great deal of change in the other one-offs. It's fairly similar sort of money. This is showing so in total this is showing over the life of the project how much money is anticipated. So it's not much of a moving feast, to be fair.
Okay, thank you. So the net of it is that in terms of capital, we're down to a slightly down, but there are some one-off amounts which help us on the way. So in total on the 6-year estimates, 4.9 versus 5.3, it's a little down. But you're not expecting any variation from that as we go forward? That's it, do you think? Or will you expect some variation?
Speaking to Graham, there hasn't been any mention of variation. He said this is pretty much what's expected.
Okay, and there's a breakdown of the section 106, which amounts to 2.168 million. That's at the bottom left-hand side. And is there any comment, Peter, on the timetable as to when the section 106 money will be made available?
I don't have that information, Chairman.
Okay, could you just let us know that? Do you think in terms of, well, is there some of that 106 money which gets started pretty soon?
I'll let you know.
And in terms of revenue going forward in future years, apart from the new homes bonus, the other amounts of money which therefore would amount to about 3 million a year, is that right, as we go forward? There's 4,928, of which 1.4 is estimated new homes bonus, but that's
yes,
a one-off, isn't it, really?
That's the one-off, yes.
And the rest of that will be annual income going forward?
The new homes bonus is annual, but that's obviously subject to government changes.
Yeah, but that's only, that's only for 4 or 5 years, isn't it? It's
yes.
Not permanent in the sense of
not
the
at
other.
all, no. It's only 4 years now.
Okay, right.
Mr. Chairman, for newcomers to this committee, you know, you're rattling through this stuff, but I'm sort of following it, but I'm like a sort of virgin in this environment.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know what a new homes bonus is, and I don't know what NHB payments are.
Okay.
So, I mean, if we could just take a bit slower for new councillors like me.
Okay.
I've got no experience of this, so I don't know what I'm looking at really.
Do you want to just briefly take us through that?
Yes, certainly. So we'll start from the top. We know what stamp duty is, I'm assuming.
Yep.
Licence fee is literally to do with the lease of the land. The CPO costs are compulsory purchase orders. That's what that stands for. Just moving down, there's well, really, new homes bonus is the next bit. New homes bonus is a payment mechanism from the government to fund local authorities for bringing new property, new dwellings into use within the borough in any particular year.
Jerry, in the middle.
We get a certain amount of money per dwelling, and we get that money for 4 years as it comes into the tax base. And that's simply what it is. there is a question about how long the government will carry on that scheme. Hence what I was saying, I say highly certain whether it will be even 4 years going forward. We'll find out in December when the government releases its plans for next year. What else have we got? I think that pretty much explains anything else that's on there, unless there's any questions.
Section 106, George, I imagine you're familiar with Section 106, eh?
I'm very familiar with the murky nature of it.
Okay.
I'm not quite knowing what monies will come when, because it's all dependent on individual developments.
Well, it's listed there, and that will all come. That's part of the condition of the planning permission. The only question is when it will come.
Yeah.
Okay, but that was the information on Brightwells that we asked for at the last meeting, so thank you very much, Peter, for that. Okay, so I think that was the only outstanding item from last time. There are various items which were covered last time, which will be in our forward plan in section C going forward. But are we all happy then to accept the minutes of the meeting from last time? Thank you very much. Let's go on to item 3, apologies for absence. Any substitutes, Amy?
Thank you, Chairman. No apologies for absence. All the members of the committee are present.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest which have been registered before the meeting?
None before the meeting, Chairman.
I imagine that there are no declarations of interest. Are there any? No? Fine, thank you. Item 5, questions from members of the public. Have we received any?
None received, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Questions from members. Have we received any?
Also none received, Chairman.
None received. Okay, fine. Thank you very much indeed. Let us move on then to item 7 of the agenda, which is the draft commercial agenda. That's on page 13 of our agenda papers. Just to say that I think there was an item on page 27 which was exempt. And I think, Kelvin, that, or Peter, is it, we've agreed to de-exempt that. Is that right? So,
yeah, we could de-exempt it. I had a slight concern around the sensitivity of that information in relation to staffing, but it's public information that could be FOI, so we can release it.
Okay, fine. So we can count that as not being exempt, so if we wish to speak to it during the course of this meeting, we can so do. Okay, so could we then have an introduction to these, please, Calvin?
Thank you, Chairman. So, members, this is an embryonic...
Oh, sorry, Calvin, before we go, could I just say that we'll be taking items 7 and 8 together?
Yes.
Item 8 concerns income generation, which is a standing item in this scrutiny committee, but we thought in the sense that we're taking this commercial strategy, which is a lot of it, or most of it is income generation, we would take the two together. So, sorry. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members, this is an embryonic strategy and is the third strand of the budget strategy. It needs to be read alongside the property and business transformation strategies. The objective is the financial target is to deliver an annual saving of 850,000 to be identified over the next 3 years. The basic idea is to embed a more commercial thought process at the outset of projects. The current project list identified brings together existing projects such as leisure investment, car parking and fees and charges. It's not an exhaustive list, but these projects will benefit from a more commercial process. Appendix 2 is a piece of work that was carried out by the Budget Strategy Working Group in the last financial cycle, hence it starts from the 17-18. However,
that's page 27.
Page 27, yeah. However, it's a good piece of work that identifies areas where we should focus on with generation of potential income generation areas. One of the ones identified in the medium potential is that of Careline. We also look at probably waiver trainer services and building control as areas that can identify some significant income generations. As I say, it's the start of a process, and comments from today will allow the strategy to be updated, and then we'll feed back to the executive. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Stephen, you chair the group which is looking at a lot of the information which impacted us. Do you want to give us any of your comments or thoughts?
Well, I have a great deal of sympathy with the officers because I think they've been asked to do something which is very difficult indeed. As it happened, we had the first meeting of the Budget Strategy Working Group dealing with talking to the heads of service this afternoon, and Kelvin was actually the second item. And indeed, the only three income streams that really are worth talking about are Careline, Building Control, and Waverley Trading Services. And I think, to be honest about it, the potential for growth in the income from those three areas is frankly limited, and it would be misleading to suggest that they represent three potential pots of gold. There's no doubt that Careline is a very valued service, and there was a point made that the degree of technology involved in it could be expanded. How much more profitable that would be for the providers such as ourselves is hard to say. There are 1,900 clients at the moment, and there's clearly many more people who might benefit from it. How successful we can be in rolling it out perhaps remains to be seen. It's something which certainly should be looked at. But it is one of those areas where, shall we say, there is plenty of demand, but unfortunately clients tend to disappear as well, because we are dealing with the elderly stage of life. Indeed, I could be a candidate myself, but before long. Waverley Trading Services is interesting. It's characterised by two very large items, the income and the outgo, and the difference is not all that large. Now, clearly there's a great deal of interest in providing trading, especially apprenticeships. But I think we need to be realistic about how fast we can grow that, how quickly we can find tutors of the right quality. And Building Controls clearly benefited recently from, as a rather sad consequence of the Grenfell Tower disaster, the authorised inspectors who moved into the area and began to displace local authorities such as ourselves have now found that regulatory requirements and insurance mean that they're not so able to operate, which is a space that Waverley is certainly seeing the opportunity to fill, and I gather from Kelvin this afternoon, this August has actually seen quite a significant increase in activity. But while it's certainly proper for us to have a commercial strategy, I think it has to be covered by a strong surface of reality, and we should not get overexcited about how much extra income we can expect to generate.
Thank you. I have some thoughts, but I will hold on those. Any other thoughts from members of the committee?
Is parking part of this?
Yes, it is.
I raised at the last Value for Money committee meeting the issue of pay on exit parking. I believe that there's a strategic parking review underway at the moment with expert consultants, and it was decided that it would be referred to the Environment ONS Committee. And I just wondered whether we've heard back from that, what the direction is.
The car parking strategy has only just commenced, as I understand it, and it will come to this committee at some point, at some relevant point when there's meat on the bone. So that was talked about last time. It is on our schedule. It will be on our schedule for information to come back to this committee. So I think it's too soon to be able to answer that question.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Other thoughts? Okay, some thoughts from me. My thoughts, Peter, is that Kelvin, that this is very embryonic. We're right at the very beginning of this process. The 3.9 million gap, which is identified in 3 or 4 years' time, is a very substantial gap. It seems to me like we've got a long way to go, and I think therefore this will need to be a standing item, or at least a regular item at this committee to look at. You've got a programme board which you mentioned at officer level. Could you just comment on what that effectively will be?
Yeah, the initial thoughts is that will be the management board, senior management board.
On page 17, on your first page of your report, you mention at the very bottom a little item of note where you say capital proceeds from the disposal of land or other assets are restricted by statute from being used other than to fund capital expenditure which may or may not be commercial in nature. Can you just remind me, the income from capital we can use in our general expenditure, what happens to capital gains? Is a capital gain able to be used, or does it have to be converted back into capital?
A capital gain as such doesn't exist within local authorities. It's just a capital receipt, and it has to be returned to use on capital only. Although you're right, any income generation from that receipt can be used to support revenue.
But if you buy something for £1 million and sell it 10 years later for £2 million, you can't take the extra million
No.
in. It has to be. It stays as capital. It's only the income from
Only
capital that we can ever use.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Sorry, Chairman,
Yes.
can I just ask, is this absolutely correct in paragraph 5 on page 18, that the deficit is forecast to rise to 3.9 million per annum? I thought that was cumulative. I'm sorry if I've been completely wrong all this time, but I thought that we were going to be losing
Our head of finance will tell
per
us.
annum.
It's correct. So it builds up each year until by the end of the 3-year strategy, we'll have a gap of 3.9 million.
But this is from... Because it didn't start last year like it was expected to, effectively, did it? Because we were expecting to have money taken away from us, or a negative grant. But it didn't happen. And from what Boris Johnson's just said, he's not going to be cutting councils' grant supports or whatever. So, I mean, is this once it starts, then we've got 4 years, and after 4 years we will be, losing £1 million a year, and I'm trying to understand exactly the...
Well, Jerry, the answer is it's 3.9 million each year going on. It may get worse or may get better, but if that's the anticipation. Steve?
Could I, essentially, you can derive this from 3 fundamental problems. One is the currently expected loss of 2 million a year in retained business rates. Another is approximately £1 million, that's a bit less, from loss of recycling credits and things allied to that. And the third is the structural deficit, whereby our costs go up inexorably by 1% or so every year. Remember that cost base is over 30 million. And yet our council tax income at the moment can only go up by 2.99%, and that's only roughly half of that. So we have this constant issue that we are, in a sense, losing money, if you want to use that sort of expression, compared to what we can raise from council tax, which used to be the standard way of covering all our costs, but now has been restricted for some time. Indeed, I don't know whether you can comment, Peter, when Tom Horwood sent round his commentary on the 3.5 billion spending boost, did I not see that he was wondering whether the 2.99% maximum increase might be reduced to only 2%?
Yeah, you're correct. The indication it's only going to be 2% cap this year when we get the information in December.
Okay.
That makes it slightly worse because it's now 100,000 a year off us.
So, Chairman, from what I've just heard, the loss of £2 million per annum from retained business rates, is that a certainty?
I think so.
Well, Jerry, I think this is a statement of record for this meeting. It is established that it is 3.9. I think we don't need to pick into that. If you want to pick into it in more detail, I think you should do that.
Yeah, well, no, the issue here is that we've been told this for the past couple of years, and it hasn't sort of happened like that. So I'm questioning whether this is a truth or a projection. That's it. Is it fact or is it projection?
All plans are projections. So it is in the plan for 2023-24 that there will be a 3.9 deficit. Is that right?
That's correct.
So I mean that's a statement of record, Jerry. And if you want to pick into that, then do so. But I think that's for outside this meeting. Thank you. A further thought from me is that in the corporate strategy that's coming before the full council on Wednesday, there's virtually no mention of this strategy. Why is that?
That's something I can take back to the executive and talk through.
Okay, so I mean, my thought was that this ought to be a significant, the commercial strategy trying to plug a 3.9 million per year deficit ought to play a part in the corporate plan. I mean, in the corporate plan there are references to bits and pieces you could take as big, but it's it ought to be a bit more explicit in the corporate strategy, I would have thought.
Yeah.
Would others share that view? Yeah. Okay, so maybe we can put that forward as a considerable aspect. The other thought from me is that it's a little although on page 23 there is something called a time scale on the third column. It's pretty much all 2021 2022. There's not much else other than that's the hoped for time when everything will happen. It does seem to me that we ought to be having some milestones and time. I mean, I know this is an embryonic report,
Exactly,
but you're
yeah.
looking for feedback, and I would have thought that having some milestones and timescales would be a pretty important thing to be doing.
Chairman, if I could add, I think that if a table is going to be put forward, the first line might be benefit if we actually separate out the three named areas that Kelvin was good enough to go into this afternoon, which are builder control, care line, and Waverley Trading Services.
Okay, that's fine. I think that's a perfectly sensible thing to do. And on page 23, there are a series of specifics there as well.
Yes.
And of course, the advisory board will need to be coming to this meeting at some point in order to, because that's going to play a significant part in terms of revenue generation, is it not? Okay. They were the only thoughts and comments that I've had. Members, are there any other items that you want to add to that list of items, or are we happy are we content to leave it at that? I'll take silence as a yes.
I was just going to make the point, I'd like to see it made explicit that we'll be looking outside the existing customer base and potentially building these lines of strategy so that that has some visibility as an objective.
Okay, so in summary then, we've covered the fact that it ought to be in the corporate plan in more detail, we need more milestones, we need a better timetable, we'd like to itemise out 3 items, namely Careline, WTS and building control fees separately. The comment we've just got from Joan. I think those are the major points that we had to make. And I think, therefore, the recommendation is recommended that that over scrutiny comment on the draft strategy which we've done, and to feed the committee's thoughts to the executive for consideration. So, are those thoughts that I've just outlined okay if we pass those forward to the executive? Officers, is there anything else you want to sort of come back on to us? Is there any thoughts that you think that perhaps we ought to have said?
No, that's fine.
Okay, fine. Any other comment?
Just one, Chairman, if I may. I mean, it might be a good idea if this were to come back to us at the next meeting after these various additions have been made, then would perhaps be more appropriate to comment on the language used and how definite it is. Because I appreciate at the moment the word embryonic was used, it seems entirely appropriate.
Yes.
You might like to have a look at the document when it's moved, shall we say, to the fetal stage.
When we come to item 12, can you hold that for then? And we should add that in appropriately. It is in item 12 as it stands, but we may want to strengthen it. So if you could just make a note to bring it up in item 12, that would be good. Okay, so, and just going to item 8 on income generation, I think we've covered both. There's nothing more that anybody wants to say regarding our agenda item 8. Okay, so we have resolved, as I said a couple of minutes ago. Fine, thank you. Then let us move on to item 9, the corporate performance report, which you have in some detail before you. I should remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that within that report, which is on agenda papers, where I find it myself, on agenda papers 31, if you go to the next page, which is page 33, sorry, page 34, go to page 34, and you will see the items that we are concerned with are 7, 8 and 9 on the left-hand side. So in terms of the, now going to the page numbers of the report itself, it's page 35, 39, 43. That's what we are concerned with. So David, do you want to...
Those pages actually are the pages of the actual report, not the agenda. So the item that we'll be looking at will start on page 67.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I was referring to the actual performance report itself, and there's the numbers on the bottom right-hand side. Using those, it's page 35. So David, do you want to kick off with the service dashboard on business transformation?
I will do as soon as I... Yes, I'm here. Most of the primary thing that we've been doing kind of last quarter was putting together the business transformation programme, which is a critical part of our medium-term financial plan response. We're talking about the customer services element of that
shortly. A few of the significant projects in the rest of the service is around the server replacement on the IT side. The government flood schemes now coming to a conclusion, and we still are working regularly with members on the Way Hill development, so they're all kind of significant projects outside of business transformation. Business transformation itself has 10 work streams. I won't go through them all here now, but given we've got 10 different projects going on there, you can see there's a fair amount of work, and we're just in the process of recruiting the business transformation team. Up until this point, we haven't had the team in place to deliver on this, with the programme being fairly recent, but hopefully by the end of this week we will have appointed 3 people to actually carry out that work. Most of the service plan items are now delivered, as you can see by the various greens on here. We've still got the one public estate item to complete. We're just kind of waiting on a final response from Surrey as to whether we can take advantage of the government funding that's available for projects where more than one organisation are involved in a kind of site like this, given that we share this with Surrey and we rent parts of this build site to Surrey and the police. We kind of qualify for one public estate funding in theory, although it's not automatic and you are in competition with other organisations. We're also still working on the building control and planning service IT system. The building control system is actually live now, and the contractor's now working on developing a system for planning, which is extended beyond our original estimates, but it's getting under control. I think that's the main things I wanted to draw attention to, I think, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I neglected to ask Nora to commence this, but maybe should we just finish this and we'll come back to you, Nora, if that's okay, on this particular item.
Has covered everything I
Yeah,
wanted
I
to
don't
highlight
really
in
do
the
it.
report.
So I leapt ahead somewhat, my apologies. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, just on this particular, these particular items on these 3 pages, any questions or thoughts to ask David?
Pete, yes, it's outcome 6, BT 6.1, to provide a profitable staff catering service. This is to evaluate the trading figures. Now, I think this is important to have a staff restaurant. It's an important welfare facility. My question is a very simple one. What has been done to bring it back to a break-even position from the last position?
Yeah, well, it is losing a significant amount of money, and although we've kind of tried different things, different menus, healthy food, marketed it in various different ways, the football just is not the same as it was in the past. So whereas that's all 10 to 15 years ago, because I've seen some very old reports, we were doing almost 100 covers a day in the staff restaurant. Now we're only doing 25. We've made up some of the deficit by the community meals service, because we now provide that out of that, so that gives us some income, but obviously the profits that we can take from that are very limited because we rely on volunteers to deliver the food, so the volunteers are volunteering to help us, they're volunteering to help the people in receipt of the service. So it makes a small profit on that, and so, we get a bit of income coming in. But nevertheless, this is something we will probably have to revisit, given the extent of the losses. I mean, the internal catering that we provide to meetings and the sandwiches and lunches for members, etc., and all the kind of coffees in the meeting rooms, that helps a bit. And if we weren't doing it internally, we'd have to buy that, outsource it, and it'd probably be a bit more expensive. So, but when you look at it in the round, we're still losing a significant amount of money, and it's probably not sustainable in the long term.
George?
I noticed on here, under heading Outstanding Service Plan Action 1819, about the building control system live, and then it refers to moving into planning later this quarter. Can that just be explained? Is that to do with the planning website?
It's not the website. No, it's the line of business core system in planning, which used to be a Northgate system, and they've now moved to a Horizon system, which is being developed on site by an organisation that we use for other things called StatMap. So the building control element is up and running, and they're now moving on to the planning side. So they're kind of building the same kind of infrastructure that did for building control, they're now building for planning.
So are you distinguishing between building controls and planning? Is that the distinction, or is it something different?
Yeah, they're on two separate.
So on the planning side of it, it's not that part of the website that members of planning committees or agents would be looking at to review planning applications, because there's a lot of concern out there that that gets addressed because it's so slow and clunky.
Yeah, no, that is
That's
a separate issue which
Okay.
we're trying to address. We've been over to Farnham Town Council to resolve the particular problems they were having. But outside of the Town Council environment, where members are accessing it at home and members of the public also, we have got an issue with our supplier's certificate for that. We're looking for them for a solution on that, because it's an interface problem with them. So we are kind of aware of that.
Okay, so is that something that we could get some feedback on when you've resolved that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, could we request that, please? Jerry?
My question was going to be about the Civica interface, actually, out of the circular planning site, because it is very difficult. It drops you back to where you weren't before, and you can be amongst 10 documents all called the same thing. We need some protocol in terms of what our officers are doing, what they're calling documents when they are uploaded, so that you don't have 10 different documents that all say EIA, part 1, and it doesn't say it's part 1 to part 10 or whatever. You can never get yourself back, do you know what I mean? But once you've read part 3 and then you go back, you're just dumped to the home page effectively. You have to go through the whole system again.
Going in and out.
And you don't know which one you were on before, and it doesn't tell. We just need it to let us know what's there.
Is that what you mean? Is that to be covered, or is that outside of this?
But what's happening with the system I'm talking about is outside of that. That's a separate issue.
But we'll address speed, will it? Because in poor broadband areas,
I don't think it will. I think that's quite separate.
It's separate. But we're aware of the issue that you're talking about. So we are.
That's not. This is planning control, which is rather different. But I think you've muddied the waters by saying we'll go into planning later. But that's nothing to do with this particular.
Well, they are looking at the rest of the planning department that's outside of building control.
But that's not the remit of this committee.
No.
The planning control is the remit of this committee, but planning is not.
The IT bit is the remit of this committee. It's in here because it's a significant IT project.
Okay. So so that is the remit of this committee. I just wanted to make sure we're doing the right thing. Okay, fine. So fine. Okay, we'll take that on board then. Jerry's point. I'll come to Julia and then Stephen. I think you had your hand up, didn't you? Julia.
Well, actually, mine was following on from Councillor Hyman's points, because I'm getting quite a lot of queries as well from the town and parishes. I take on board that the IT perspective of this actually comes to this committee, but I actually think there needs to also be, if I may suggest, Chairman, some liaison through the coordinating board with the Environment Committee as well, because they have a lot of the operational side of planning, and I think this issue is of such gravity now, because it's gone on for a long time. It's an issue for a number of our residents and the town and parishes, that there needs to be a joined up approach through the coordinating board as well, to actually prioritise addressing this. Thank you.
I think that's a very sound idea. Why don't we have a letter from me to the relevant person on the other committee to say we would like to bring those two things together, and could we find a way of doing that as a specific recommendation? Would that make sense? Would that be an action for you? Yeah. Okay, fine, thank you. But you've got what you need to do that, yes?
I think so. I think we picked up the relevant points with
Okay, fine. Thank you. So, was there somebody else who was next? Ross, Stephen, yes, then I'll come to you.
A quick question, if I may, about the timing. If we go to this item again, Q4 actions taken. This is now the middle of September. Has work not really started yet on exporting the Horizon approach to the planning?
No, it has started.
It has started.
There's a project group up and running, and which was the project group for building control, and it's just moved on to the next
Right, so
stage.
how long? Are we talking a month, 3 months, longer?
At least until January.
So in fact, this go live, unlikely to go live before Q4, that's a certainty now, is it?
It's not a certainty. It's not a certainty.
You think we might go live before January?
We might go live. I think I would say it's unlikely. I'm not on the project group myself, so
Right.
I can't say with absolute certainty. I don't think it's likely to be before January.
So with a bit of luck, before the end of this council year, but it would be
Yeah.
unwise to be more optimistic than that.
That's a good summary.
Thank you.
Okay, Jerome.
I got two questions. One, I'm slightly unclear as to whether this performance issue of downloading or looking at planning applications is going to be addressed, and if so, when. Second question is, IT projects, in my experience, have an enormous propensity for overrunning, both in terms of schedule as well as budget. Can you just reassure us to where we are at with the existing IT project?
So the existing IT project has been delayed. So originally we expected to have completed by now, and it hasn't. So there were some.
Sorry, is that relating to planning or is that relating to building control? Which one are we on?
Building control and
planning.
and planning. So building control completed later than was originally
Right,
anticipated.
that is done.
But that is done.
Right. And now we're talking planning. Okay.
And now we're talking planning,
Right.
but there was a knock-on effect for the planning system, so that was kind of later than we expected. One of the issues around it is that we're not actually paying for this system. The contractors are developing this system for the first time with us, so but we haven't paid any kind of capital outgoing for the building control system. But there will be ongoing revenue costs, but the initial capital wasn't, and it's the same for the planning.
So we're riding on the back of, we're a guinea pig.
Yeah, sorts, but it's a supplier we know.
Mm-hmm.
The alternatives in the market weren't great. We were going to go with another supplier originally, but they kind of failed the due diligence test at the 11th hour. So we then needed to find another solution, given that the existing line of business system was getting beyond viability. The other, if we went with one of the kind of main contract suppliers, we were in the hundreds of thousands of pounds. So we looked for another solution, which we agreed with the members that were portfolio holders at the time.
And in answer to the first question about the performance or an ability of parish and town councils to be able to look at these documents speedily,
Yeah,
is that something which is being addressed?
it's a known issue that's been addressed, but we haven't got
Well,
a
that's
solution
what I've asked
yet.
to be
Yeah.
included in the letter.
Okay, right, fine.
So-
Sorry, yes.
I think if we can incorporate, Yasmin, the difficulties, the timetabling, the budgeting and so on, so I think, and I think we should request that something come back. David, so I'm piling things on here for you, but I think it's a pretty important project, and it's something that we ought to see, and it's not just us that ought to see, it's the other committee as well.
Yeah, that's fine. The portfolio holder has made it a priority also, so it's something we're well aware of.
So could we put it on our action plan going forward? I think that's all we all feel fairly
Put
keen
it
on.
on the agenda of the coordinating board.
Yeah, yes, well, we can cover all that in that list. Okay, fine,
Thank you, Chairman.
I think that takes care of that. Just one thing again from me, on outcome 17, page 37 or 69, whichever way you want to look at it, this business of Surrey County Council, you've put dates, revised it to be confirmed. Have you got a date then when you expect this might happen?
We have not.
Could we chase the county pretty seriously on this, please?
We
If necessary?
yes.
Use one or two of your portfolio holders who are also county councillors. I guess I could be deployed as well. But let's try and make sure that gets resolved, can
Yeah,
we?
it's live at the very highest echelons of the organisation, but we'll
Good.
reinforce the message.
Well, I shall expect to hear from the chief executive. All right, fine, thank you. Nora, is there anything you want to add to any of that?
I think the only thing that I wanted to point out, at the request of this committee, who wanted to look at the complaints, the way we're dealing with the complaints, our response rate, which was masked in this one umbrella indicator, which we will get to when we get to the policy and governance
Okay.
dashboard. We actually developed more granular view for the members on the page 69 at the bottom. Actually, you can see now the complaints broken down per different levels. So we have level 1 that.
All of one complaint.
Oh, but this
And I see that although it's 0.0%, it's registered as red, i.e. out of control. Is that right?
Well, the service is quite lucky because I didn't have any complaints to address, but I think showing the complaints in that way have definitely allowed us to look at the areas, because we already highlighted that there are some concerns in housing and some other services, and heads of service being tasked to look at the processes, review those processes and address them going forward. So it allows this escalation process as well. So I think it's something that we as officers appreciated, and I thought you will find of use as well going forward. I don't think there was a specific area with regards to finance, so we can move on to. So
Okay.
as a finance or business transformation, I think we are still forecasting the favourable variance against the set budget. So I think.
Okay, thank you. Shall we move on then? Do you want to introduce the next item on page 71? Or do we go straight to Peter on that?
I'm not sure if we should continue the trend and I just get head of service David Michael left out.
That's good. We wouldn't want to leave the head of service out, so we'll go straight to Peter. Okay. Peter.
Thank you, Chairman. Very true. It's quite a vanilla kind of story here. It was a busy quarter. We finalised our final account for the audit with the new audit team, which was quite a drama considering they parachuted in at the last minute. But we got the job done. We were signed off within the statutory time limit, 31st of July. The Revenues and Bends project, Revenues and Benefit Systems Thinking, it's concluded, so the service is now operating in the new methodology that was devised by the project team. The positions have been recruited too, so we're just now bedding in the new service and focusing on performance to get the service to where it should be, and the resulting budget savings will come through in the new year budget. Budget Strategy Working Group, Councillor Mullen has referred to, is well underway, so there's significant work happening in the next 4 weeks regarding that, which is a significant and really valued support towards the underpinning the medium-term financial plan, working with the officers to identify the way forward. In terms of performance indicators, they're all pretty much in the green. A smidgen of percentage off on F3, which is the 30-day invoices, but 898.4 is nothing to be alarmed at, especially looking at the revenue, it was 84.6, slightly different, but we're beyond those days now. Service plan, things are well on track on service plan. F7.1, some work that we were doing within the finance team itself around our financial systems is being transferred to David Allen on the transformation project just to make sure that we're capturing everything in one place, and there's some dovetailing of those projects into the wider remit that's been undertaken there. The property company under Estates and Valuation, that's progressing. That'll come through the investment advisory board, which will be in the next 2 weeks.
Next week.
Next week. Be that precise. So that's been progressed, and we'll be able to talk about more detail at the next meeting. What's going on there? What else is there to say?
Complaints?
Quarter, well, looks good. Looks okay, really.
Looks pretty good.
Yeah, it's all fine. But I suppose the finance bit at the end was Way Court. Way Court's not let at the moment, so we have 2 floors under offer. Can't really say much more here unless we're going to exempt because it's commercially sensitive, but some significant progress has been made to move that situation forward.
Okay, we will go into exempt at the end of this meeting, so if anybody wants to raise any thoughts on that, can you hold until that moment, please? Okay, but the rest of it looks in fairly good shape. Any comments or thoughts from members of the committee? Okay, I think that looks a pretty good set of indicators, so thank you for that. Let us move on to policy and governance. Nora, do you want to introduce that? Or?
Well, I think it's only fair to let Robin do that now. The other health service will. I'm happy to chip in on some point.
Very good. Okay, Robin.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. So Q1 pretty busy for the Policy and Governance Service, in particular owing to the elections team, borough and town, all-out borough elections and also town and parish elections. And then although we were not expecting European parliamentary elections, we did eventually have to also prepare for those within the quarter. Clearly, there was a big job for the elections team to do to get ready for those all-out borough elections, but also a big job for the whole council to do, in particular democratic services in terms of swearing in the new councillors, in terms of running the induction programme, getting to know all those councillors, supporting the process of committee appointments, etc., preparing for the annual mayor-making council, all those sorts of things. So interesting time for the team, always every 4 years. The report contains some of the highlights from, of course, the rest of the service. One thing I'd just like to draw attention to was within the human resources team, the human resources strategy had been agreed in a previous quarter, but actually a lot of time spent during Q1 of this year just progressing that, and in particular the digitisation of staff paperwork and records, which is something that's really important, not just in terms of efficiency within the council, but also in terms of resilience, to make sure that our paperwork is properly protected, and also that in the event of any emergencies, whatever, it is all securely kept. You'll see within the report that we've got performance issues against our sickness targets across the whole organisation. And as it says within the report, we're trying to tackle this both on a broad basis, trying to support and promote health and well-being within the organisation, and then of course individually managing individual cases, both with managers and with the support of occupational health where that's needed. I won't dwell too much on the complaints read because Nora's already picked up on that, but happy to answer any questions around that. So the overview in terms of this year's service plans actions is that they're currently 93% on track. There are some outstanding from the previous year that haven't yet been delivered. Largely those are due to the change of administration, because in terms of our communications and engagement strategy, it was really a sort of awkward timing for us in terms of the new strategy ready to go, and then of course change of administration, so we had to make sure that we're working with the new administration on that communications and engagement strategy before it's worked up to go to the executive. Working with the town and parish councils on making sure that they've all published what they need to publish following their elections, and then just reviewing some of the flexi-time audit recommendations to make sure they're in line with the new HR strategy. So happy to answer any questions that members have about the report if I can, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions, thoughts? Perhaps I could just put in one myself, if I may, and that's page 76, which is HR2, which is the short and long-term sickness absence.
Yeah.
The trend is dreadful. I mean, we've gone each quarter, 5 quarters now, things have got worse. We've gone from green to amber to red. I know you've got a bit of explanation, and there are 1 or 2 cases which are presumably taking that down. Is that the major point?
Indeed. I mean, particularly around long-term sickness absence, where you do have individual cases, that very quickly raises the total, rolling cumulative total. So I do expect to see that going down. However, it is a challenging time. A proportion of, like many organisations, we're seeing an increase in mental health issues coming through. Some of that you may regard as positive in that actually there's a higher reporting of mental health issues than there has been previously, but it is a real issue for us. So as I said, we're undertaking projects to promote and support health and well-being within the organisation. The senior management team, with the support of Human Resources, is also about to have another look at our Fit for Work policy to make sure that that is the right policy and that it's being properly implemented, because it is intended to be a positive policy to support staff, making sure that they are fit for work, but also taking action where action needs to be taken. So it is an issue, I entirely recognise that. My advice is that we don't change the target at this point, because I think the target is the right one, but that we focus on trying to bring the performance back in line with that target. So.
Okay, I wonder if the committee we ought to note with some concern to the executive that particular item and look to better news as we go forward. And thank you for the explanation, but I think that's an item of considerable significance. Jerome.
If I may well be sort of treading on sensitive ground here. Often, in my experience, absences are often due to morale. Would you like to comment about the state of the level of the morale of our staff, and specifically, are there any specific actions which you as management have taken to address that?
Could I couple that also with the staff survey? Was the staff survey brought before this committee? Did we see the results of that when I wasn't a member, or was that something which needs to come?
You haven't yet, I don't think, but you certainly can do. The results are recently in, so I'm very happy to bring those back to this committee. I think that's a really good suggestion.
I wanted to come in.
Yes, okay, I'm sorry.
No, the two things are entirely linked, and it would seem to me to make perfect sense for us to see the staff survey results. I hesitate to add anything to the next meeting, which may take us through to midnight, but I think it's important that we pick that up and tie it back into morale and to sickness.
You're right, but it's sensible for us, we can leave it till the next
meeting. Are you happy for us to be
absolutely.
tied in that way? If we could do that, and I would certainly appreciate. It doesn't. I mean, presuming that the results are reasonably okay. I think it's something which we should see.
So quite right to mention it, absolutely. And in fact, the project was coordinated by the Human Resources team, but also the internal, the Communications and Engagement team. So you're absolutely right. There is a link between the two things. The results are generally positive, and the scores around morale are generally good. So I'm very happy to bring back those results. There are some things within there that the organisation needs to learn from and deal with, and I can also bring that back in aggregate for you. The only elements that I won't be able to bring back will be the individual staff comments, because staff were given a commitment to confidentiality when they completed.
I think I would be content with a fairly high level position.
Absolutely.
But I don't need to go into the great, unless of course there looks to be a problem, then we may ask to go into the detail. But I think it should be fair.
I can bring you back the themes from the comments as well.
That would be good. Thank you. Sorry, yes, Jason.
But the highest level that you can look at these numbers is easy, the sickle work and slowly going mad. But why? We need to know why, don't we?
Well, I think if we bring in the staff survey, and then that will give us a better view. We've had an explanation in terms of the sickness that 2 or 3 people on long-term sickness can distort the numbers. So I think we have to accept that, and then we tie it into the staff survey. I think that will be something for us to follow up.
But the fact that it's increasing and steadily, the trend here. Is it possible for us to also, for next time, just give us a little bit of further background? Because if the historic rate is it used to be 4% or whatever, or you used to be 4.3 or 2.1 or whatever, we're just looking over a 1-year period. So I was just wondering whether you could look back, say, 10 years we used to experience such and such, and 5 years ago it used to be, to give us a little bit of a bigger picture to that, more of a jigsaw.
Happy to, Chairman. We'll see what we can do. With HR data, there does tend to be issues around making sure you're counting the same thing when you're looking over a long time period, but I'll do what we can.
But I'm very conscious that 1 or 2 people over a long period of time on long-term sickness do have a significant distorting effect. If we take those out, then maybe the picture will be improved.
Chairman, yes, I was going to say, is it possible actually to split HR2 up into the impact of those people who maybe, if it's over 20 days, split it up in long-term and short-term, because it will be wrong to get alarmed.
Correct.
If, as you said, if just 2 people who long-term sick can be off for quite a long time, and every extra day presumably adds pressure to this number going up, even if nothing else is going wrong.
Well, precisely, and I have managed exactly that situation. My figures were appalling for some time as a result of just that. So, yes, let's take that as we go forward, and that will be very helpful.
I just wanted to add, if we could move to page page 39 to the corporate dashboard, we actually have more detailed information on the absence that shows us the breakdown between the short term and the long term as well. So as you can see,
So on page
page
13,
13, sorry,
Is that
39 of the agenda, so it's page 7 of the report.
page 7 of the report. Okay. Absence, oh yes, there is absence data there. You're absolutely right. Thank you.
Is maternity leave included in this?
No, this is sickness absence.
It's not counted for that. Okay, I've responded.
So as you can see, our short-term absence actually has been decreasing. So it is the long-term absence that we have some issues with. But as you mentioned, Chair, it is the small number of cases that absence kind of concerns, and also although the number of the cases has decreased because they are continue on the actual number of days that they continue on being off sick is kind of being amassed, and therefore kind of impacting.
Well, that's helpful, and that reinforces what you said, but I think if we can get a little more data when we get the staff survey, that will be very helpful. Okay, thank you. Any other items that anybody wants to raise before we move on? And Laura, are there any other comments that you want to make in conclusion?
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I think we've got enough there to make some comments back. Yasmin, are you okay on that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let us move on then to item 10, page 79, customer services project update. And I think there are some there's a presentation that you want to take us through. We should all have copies of that. Has that been handed out? You all got copies which look like that? Okay, David, do you want to introduce this?
Yes. I'm not going to go through the presentation in detail because it's most of the slides replicated in the report that you've that's in the agenda papers. We just kind of presented the information a bit differently in a different format. So really the purpose of today's report is just to kind of bring you up to date with where we are on the customer services review. So the customer services project is one of the 10 business transformation projects. It's designed to save money and help the overall budget challenge. We're expecting the customer services project to deliver at least £300,000 of cashable savings. That's our target. We're hopeful that we can exceed that, but £300,000 is our target. Now, the way that we will do that is by reducing the amount of contact that we are getting from our customers. So the less contact that we're getting from customers, the less staffing resource we need to respond to it. So there's kind of two ways of doing that. One way is by enabling those customers who wish to do so to self-serve, where we have the technology that allows that. The second way is to review our kind of processes and ways of organisation to find out where we've kind of got waste as in systems thinking terms, so where we're dealing with inquiries because we haven't done something properly or because we haven't delivered something, and then of course we get contact from the customers finding out why things have gone wrong and what we're doing to correct it. So by addressing those two issues, we can hopefully reduce the amount of traffic coming into the organisation, and so we'll need less resource to respond to it. So one of the kind of first steps on that journey was to get better information, because we didn't have this information available, on what customers actually contacting us about. So the slides that you see in front of you and much of the body of the report is a summary of that customer data. So what we did over a 3-week period was require every member of staff to log electronically or manually. There was a combination of both. Any customer inquiry that they dealt with personally during that 3-week period. And then that enabled us to kind of map out how many people were contacting us, what about, who was dealing with it. And that's given us quite a bit of information for planning for the future. The handout that you've got, the last page of that, looks at the top 35 customer journeys. And there's more than 35, actually, there's a lot more than 35, but these were the kind of the top ones where we got over a certain amount within that period of time. And what we're looking to do now is map out those journeys in some detail, so we can work out whether it's something that can be replicated using technology, or whether we have to deal with it in a different way. And it's an enormous task mapping out these number of journeys. We're trying to do that, complete that task in about a year. And that's one of the kind of our main priorities at the moment, is finding a mechanism and a methodology for us to look at these tasks, understand how they're working at the moment, understand how we can correct them and deliver them better, and understand if we can do it in a different and more efficient way, whether that be by automation or by looking at a kind of specialist customer centre, which we haven't got at the moment. But we've now kind of concluded that we do need to move to a single customer service centre, so that is kind of part of our thinking. And before we get to that point, we do need the technology in place. So we've already acquired something called Master Data Management Technology, which enables all our systems to talk to each other. So should you kind of ring in to change your address, you would only have to do it once, because the systems would all talk to each other and you wouldn't have to ring into 5 or 6 different service departments, as is the case at present. It does cleverer things than that, but that's just an example. And we're also looking at some customer management technology, and we haven't come to a conclusion on our supplier for that, but we will do, hopefully we're hoping to do that by the end of this month, and begin the procurement exercise, so we've got it in place in January. So our IT team is looking at a lot of integration issues between these kind of various systems, so they all kind of work. We need to have them in place before we can set up our customer service centre, which will be bringing together a number of customer service teams that are at the moment dispersed across the organisation into one place. And a lot of the kind of the data that we're showing you here is some of the information that we've considered in coming to those conclusions. I think I'll leave it there, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. There's a great deal in there for us to consider. Thoughts, comments, Stephen?
If you look at the bottom chart on page 2, what struck me is the imbalance between the number of contacts in each of the three weeks. And I suppose is that a source of concern? What is the reason why week 1 should be so much busier than weeks 2 and 3? I mean, week 1 is almost twice as many contacts as week 3.
Yes, well, we have got a theory for this. So there was a bit of a 3-line whip. Everyone's got to fill this survey out, and everybody did, but people's enthusiasm for filling it out comprehensively seemed to wane by the time we got to weeks 2 and weeks 3. So week 2 was half term, so you might have expected some sort of reduction, although people are off, more people are off working half time. So
was that the summer term, Debbie? When was this actually done?
February.
Oh, it does say February. My apologies.
I forgot myself then. And if that was the case, even if they had diminished in week 2, because people are all known, you would expect it to increase in week 3. So we don't actually know, but our kind of best guess, looking at the forms that were returned, is that people just didn't fill it in so comprehensively in week 3. So we have based our projections on week 1.
This is our staff telling us how many calls they're getting, is it? So it's our staff who weren't filling in the questionnaire. It's nothing to do with residents not doing something.
No.
Okay.
So we were asking people to log every. It wasn't just calls. It was people coming in to see them, emails they took, any contact at all.
And we were sending them out reminders repeatedly?
No. Yeah. We would chase people down. Yeah.
It is what it is.
Everybody has to fill them in.
I've got a follow-up. I mean, was the arrangement or scatter of topics fairly constant throughout 3 weeks, or did they show changes?
Not in that respect, no. I think they didn't sort of change dramatically from between weeks.
They did or did not?
No, they didn't.
And that is, if you want to, I mean, if you've got some staff who are not cooperating, that is bad news. But
Well, they all cooperated, but they just cooperated more in week one than they did in week two. It wasn't that they didn't complete the returns, but there just wasn't as many, it just wasn't filled in.
I think we should write
as
that
often.
down and frame it. Joe, do you want to go?
I mean, my comment was very similar vein. I noticed that the top item was council tax billing, and I wondered if there was any coincidence in the billing cycle. Was this at about the time council tax bills went out,
Yeah,
or
so-
the information
So
booklet?
we kind of knew that we would get a lot of calls about certain things, because a lot of our activities are cyclical. So if we've done things at certain times in the year, it would have been inflated for that particular function. So we have kind of taken that into account. So it was just kind of, you know, there was never going to be a good time to do this. So, you know, it will be effective.
No, I mean, I
what
was
going
just
on at the
trying
time.
to get a feel. I sort of thought it was that cyclical answer. I just wanted to be sure. So, you know, this month we wouldn't expect that council tax billing would necessarily be the top item.
No, it's always one of the most popular points of contact.
That's people ringing in to say how much they enjoy paying their council tax.
Yeah, that sort of thing.
Okay, any other thoughts? Julie?
Yes, so like Stephen and Jerry, I'm quite concerned to see the differentials here. Given again the significance to the council business and the ongoing functioning of this council and making sure that it's resilient, if we've got very sporadic data in places because for one reason or another staff haven't perhaps bought into this, and I don't know what the reasons for that are, I would have thought that one of the most important things to actually have a successful project is to get overall staff buy-in. So what are you doing to address that ongoing? Otherwise, we're not going to have a project that's fully successful, I would suggest.
So, yeah, you're right that we do need to maximise staff buy-in as far as is possible. So we have made it a big corporate priority. So before this survey launched, Tom made it one of the core theme of his staff briefings. So we did staff briefing in January. Before we started it, Graham spoke about the medium-term financial plan issue. I spoke about the current customer service project, along with Louise, who's the project manager. So all kind of staff had the opportunity to ask any questions they had at that time, and that led to the staff survey. And although, you know, as we've talked about the difference in differentials, there we still had 96% of staff completed the survey, and now we're getting the results in and we're getting to some conclusions as to where we're going. We launch into another round of consultation and dialogue, which will start this week again with the managers event we've got on Thursday, where we'll be having a full discussion on transformation generally and customer services specifically.
Stephen?
Having listened to that, I share Julia's point. I don't think it's actually acceptable. The way I think you should do this is to have, and you've got a long project, I think you should be doing this on a quarterly basis, 1 week at a time. I understand people getting slightly bored with it, but 1 week with Chief Executive emphasising how important it is, A, to get over the fact you may be polluting the data by seasonal issues. You don't want to have council tax as the top one, and if it's only going to be a February item, or mainly a February item, because you'll end up drawing unsafe conclusions. So, Chairman, I would actually seriously suggest, I know my colleagues feel, that we should recommend that this exercise is done again, individual weeks on a sort of quarterly basis, so we have good data as to where the contacts, at which categories the contracts fall into, on a much more broad basis, so we'll get better data and hope the staff will not get bored so quickly, because if it's 1 week at a time, they can be encouraged strongly to take it seriously when the week happens.
I would I understand the point that's being made, but this could have just been done in a single week, in which case there wouldn't be any difference between week
No,
1, 2 and 3.
I'm saying that's not a good idea.
Or you could take a 3-week period, and if the 3 weeks had been shown to us as a single item, then we wouldn't have been able to work out the difference between the three. I agree if there is a significant difference in the data between week 1 and week 2 and week 2 and week 3, which you could then say is at the back, that is because the number of items being recorded are different. But I don't know. Is there a difference, significance in the composition of the data?
No,
I'll come to you, Jerry.
not significant. And this isn't the only source of information we've got for volumes. So we know how many phone calls are coming in and which departments they're going to. So it's not this isn't the only source. The real valuable information we got from this exercise, the information that was absolutely critical, was the kind of common customer journeys, which is that is the thing we really needed this exercise to identify. So we knew where we had to focus our attention and where we were going to get most value by automating or changing.
Sorry, there's a phrase there I haven't. Common customer journeys. Could you just rephrase that in more general language?
Okay. Well, they're listed out on the back page of the presentation.
Yeah, no, I've seen that.
So, yeah, a really common customer journey is somebody ringing up to find out what their council tax.
You mean the subject of the call?
Yeah.
I think I'm a bit concerned that the survey was done at a time when council tax was going out, because there are 18,000 contacts which are being analysed here, and 1,965 are council tax, which is only going to be at that time of year. At this time of year, that number will be dramatically down, and therefore it's not a good time to do the survey.
I think we asked the question of David, does it apply? Is that fair to say that the number is, say, half of that if you do it in July? And that instead people are complaining because the grass hasn't been cut.
Council tax contact is always one of our top 2 areas of contact.
Okay, well that's an answer. Joan?
Yeah. I was just going to, I think, support what David was saying. I don't think we should get too hung up on the detail of what comes top. I think there's been a reasonable stab at identifying the first 35 processes that need to be analysed to make them as streamlined as possible. And they each need to be analysed and streamlined. I think
that's the reason for finding out the data, and if we were to do it all over again, would it show anything considerably different, I guess is the question. Jerry?
Yeah, I think what Steve is concerned, and I'm concerned the same, is that if we decide, right, council tax billing, we're going to outsource that to another company to look after because it's such a large proportion of the contacts that come in, then if in fact you're only getting half that number later in the year, perhaps it was a bad decision. I think he's simply saying we need to make the decisions based on data that isn't only from 1 week in February, because obviously that may not be representative. From what David said, I'm getting the impression that actually it's up at that level all year round. Is that what you're saying?
It's always high. If you look at the kind of number of contacts on the right-hand column of this list, you can see that we haven't got that many contacts that exceed over 200 a week. So those are the ones to focus on. And whether council tax is 1,900 or 1,000 or 800, it's always going to be in that top 20.
So where is that?
It's on
that's the list.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But so this was based on that sample, was it not? This is simply February's data.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, how do you know what the June data is? I mean, would you have other means of knowing that council tax is always popular all year round?
We do.
Right, and what is that?
So we can tell how many phone calls are put through to each corporate, and we can also see how many emails are going through to generic email addresses.
Right.
So it isn't a surprise which areas are coming top. But what we did need to verify was what the actual customer journeys or common customer, whatever that terminology we want to use. So we knew what people were actually phoning up about, so we can kind of think, right, those are the journeys that we need to kind of map, so we can understand if we can.
Could I just interject as the chairman here? Could I just ask then that we request you just to convince yourself that the data is valid, and that you're able to corroborate the data by looking at other streams of information. And I think it would be a reasonable thing to ask you to do, to convince yourself and then to convince us that the top ones here
the first half,
are
that's
realistically
difficult. I'll manage the second half.
But I think you get the feeling of the committee, they're a little bit unhappy
that's
about
fine.
the way in which the data was put together. And if that data is significantly warped by its timing, or by the fact that members of staff did not contribute as fully in the third week as they did in the first, is that going to cause a concern as to the identification of the top items? I mean, because if it's not going to change the top items, then our concerns ought to be dissipated. If you consider it carefully and decide that it's not, then I think we should be reasonably happy. Would that be a reasonable way in which to request it?
That's fine.
So what
Yes.
period would you consider ideal to take these statistics?
Yes,
along
and
to
as
these
Joe
three?
said, if you take it in the middle of July and August, maybe you get grass cutting as
It's
the
not
top.
on, grass cutting isn't on here, Chairman. That's
Well,
why.
I realise that, but
February's bound to be a very quiet time.
Yeah, it's not a lot.
It's probably under
I mean, Chairman,
community parks and
if I were starting again,
or Jerry's haircutting.
you would have this done every 4 times a year at different times of year, and then you'd strip out the seasonal problems.
Yes.
If there's other data which can show.
Well, that's the point. I think the feeling is this valid data? And I think that's the question we have to ask you to go back and check. Jura?
I think it would be useful actually to have this verified, because if you then start to tackle self-service or the aims of trying to reduce it, you've got a baseline against which you are going to do a comparison. I think that would be helpful as a strategic change which you want to introduce.
I mean, it's certainly the type of information we should be collecting more regularly. We just haven't got the systems in place to do so.
Yeah.
So that will have to be corrected, which is why we had to go through this fairly onerous exercise of getting people to fill it in on Excel spreadsheets and then create these formulas for working out what it was.
But I think it's just I wouldn't, personally, I wouldn't get overexcited about being 100% accurate. Just a reasonable, confident ballpark figure would be quite adequate.
I would hate to have our members of staff spending significant amounts of time again on filling out this data. Because it is, you know,
It was a colossal exercise.
no, I can understand it's a colossal exercise, which is why I'm defending you in a sense against the rest of the members of the committee.
I agree.
And I think we have to be a bit careful about asking for it to be done again. If members of staff are convinced that this is identifying the top areas that ought to be looked at, and we ask you to test that again, and also corroborate it by looking at other streams of information, I think we should be content.
Absolutely.
I would back that. That's
Was this all collected manually?
Well, it's on an Excel spreadsheet, so there's an individual like you saying, yeah, I've just had a call from X, and at the end of the day, they're analysing all the calls they've had.
Chairman, could I
It's a simple
a constructive
computer
way
program to do it for
forward?
you.
Given this is a long-term project, could we have a summary of the corroborative data sprinted to the next meeting?
There we go. Okay.
Yeah,
Is that reasonable?
that's fine.
Rather than asking you to do it all over again.
That's fine.
Annual total.
Well done, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. We are actually, ladies and gentlemen, asked to note this piece of work at the moment. I think we've gone rather further than noting, but David, are you okay with...
Yeah, I'm now relieved, Chair. Thank you.
But I do think there are some, we could go on all night because there are some interesting factors, it's interesting data, but I think we should bring that to a close. Okay, thank you. Our thanks to members of staff for all of that. Where have we got to go to next? The item 11, the budget strategy working group update. Stephen, do you want us to bring us any further up to date other than that which you've told us already? Being careful if you want to go into exempt.
No, I can be quite general. We now have a committee of group size 7.
7?
And all asking different questions too, which is even better. And we've had 2 meetings, and we've now had the first of our meetings with the heads of service. The second one is tomorrow. The third and fourth will be within the next fortnight. And that gives the group a chance to ask detailed questions of exactly how the services are presented, to understand what the staffing needs are, what scope there is for changes there, and of course looking at income, although as I've probably indicated, that's quite a hard one to find. Councils are much more focused on service provision than making money. But no, we will be reporting back in the early part of October, I hope.
Okay, so our next meeting is November, presumably,
Yes,
to give us a fairly full
There'll be a written report to that meeting.
report at that meeting. Okay, can we, so, yet another to add to our meeting. We're going to have a long meeting in November, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, any questions of Stephen? Any thoughts from officers? No? Okay, fine, thank you very much indeed. That is duly received. Committee work programme. Yasmin, do you want to take us through? We're on page 85 now and going forward.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So you've got the committee work programme in front of you. Just to reiterate, Section A is looking forwards at future items. So we've got September, this committee's items on there, beginning with corporate performance report, ending in draft commercial strategy. So those are the items we considered today. Most of those items will remain on for the November meeting because they are standing items or recurring items. We've talked a little bit today and this evening about additional items for November, so a written report from the Budget Strategy Working Group I can add on, and there are several other...
Well, that's a standing item, but we now do need to bring it up a little in its level report.
Yes, so I'll put a bit more, I suppose, comment in there to say it's more than just an update on the progress that's...
Will that be a written report, Steve?
Yes.
So there will be a written report which will be circulated with the agenda papers, yes? Okay, thank you.
I can fill that comment out a little bit more. And then we've got several other items for November, and as you've commented already this evening, Chairman, that November is rather full. I do want to reiterate the point that the work programme belongs to the committee, so it's up to the committee what it considers. There are obviously some corporate priorities and the general sense on that list. And there are things that the committee's asked for previously. So it's within your gift to rearrange those items if you wanted to push things back. We have a meeting in January and one in March. Or alternatively, we can keep those items on for November. It's completely up to the committee in that respect.
Okay, so we're on page 86 and 87, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think the standing items will all remain, and I think the Budget Strategy Working Group from Stephen will be an important point to retain. The draft commercial strategy we've dealt with today, but will that stay as a standing item? Or
Chairman, I think you're asking me to hold that thought for this item. I was suggesting we might want to see it again when it's moved from the embryo to the fetus.
Yes, indeed.
So November.
But will that be November, or is that too soon?
Well, we aim for November. I think it needs to get moving. So.
Okay, so we ought to have it in November, into the November meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's pretty important. The economic development strategy, which is down for November, is that something which we could defer, or is that something which we need to see?
That was put there as just an officer's suggestion of one of the items that the committee might be interested in. I'm not aware that there are any sort of major milestones for that piece of work coming up.
I wonder if we might drop that into the meeting beyond.
So it could be for January. However, I would just like to raise that January we are expecting. Sorry, it's not on there. It's we're expecting service plans and budget as the usual items for those.
That's a full meeting all by itself, isn't it?
I expect so, depending on how much the committee.
Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, shall we, in agenda planning, we'll discuss that. Can you leave that with me? And if I think we've got time to put it in, we'll put it in. Otherwise, we'll delay it, because I don't want to have such a full meeting in November that we're not able to do justice to the information. Jerry?
Only so that we know, the EDS, the Economic Development Strategy, it says to scrutinise performance against the action plan. Well, we have a performance scrutiny item. Is there any reason why that can't be within that? Or do you know what I mean? Instead of having it as a separate item, we're looking at performance. How difficult is it? And how long will it take? I mean, we need to consider those things before we decide whether we're doing it.
That's a reasonable point. Yasmin?
I would say I'd have to have a look in the service plans and see, because obviously we get the performance report refers to service plans, and if the service plans have picked up the points in the economic development action plan, then that should exactly be coming through.
So can we leave that to the chairman's agenda briefing for you to sort between you and bring it forward?
We'll sort that out and decide on whether it can be squeezed in or whether it needs to.
Because otherwise it may never happen, and it would be nice.
I agree entirely. Okay. Going over the page then to page 87, cost implications of planning appeals, is it something that needs to come in November?
So this was a suggestion by the Vice Chairman, well, as an idea for scrutiny. It came from the red indicator in the planning section of the performance reports. The performance has dropped to 46 point something, I believe. So that was the idea behind that. I don't know if the item needs to be taken as close as possible to that date. It's sort of maybe time critical.
No,
but
I don't regard it as time critical as having requested it. I think it's a piece of work, but I don't see it's critical for November.
I mean, it is something of significant interest to us all, but I think in the interest of time we will defer that. We won't forget it, but we'll just defer it.
Chairman, it's probably important for me to raise at this point the environment ONS. We're going to receive not exactly the same report, but a similar report. This committee was going to get more detail on obviously the value for money implications. So that might be another one that we need to speak to the chair of environment about. Just to
all right. Well, that sounds like another one for agenda planning. And if there is something which we can bring, even if it's only a quick item, then maybe I'll have to be resolute in terms of keeping it a quick item. And maybe it would be sensible to have more quick items for information rather than going into great detail, so it should cover the ground.
Okay.
I'll consider that in agenda planning. Complaints handling, well, that's the usual standing stuff, is it? Or is that something different?
So this is the annual report on complaints. So I believe there are two parts on the policy and then a review of complaints
it's the annual
received.
as opposed to the quarterly stuff. Okay.
Yes. So I don't know, Nora, you perhaps know a little bit more.
It's the standard annual report on complaints. So
But it's something which we need to see. We can't
it's best not to defer that.
No, I agree with that. I was quite keen for the Investment Advisory Board to come. I am a member of that board. If you like, I can report back verbally for the next meeting on what we've done. Would that be possible? And if I think it's significant, we can bring things to this meeting. But would that be a sensible way to cover that rather than bringing Mr. Merriweather to the meeting?
Are you referring to the?
This is the property investment strategy.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Peter. Is November a key date for the review of the property investment strategy? What sort of dates are you looking at?
So we do plan to have it in place in November.
So it ought to come.
Sure.
I think we get Mark along here. Why not? That's what.
No, fine. Okay.
For.
No, let's do it. Okay, but ladies and gentlemen, we will have a very full meeting in November.
Chairman, that's reviewing the document to see whether it's still doing its job, isn't it?
I think so, but others.
The document is going to be updated as well, so it's not just about doing its job; it's about expanding the base.
Will we see proposals for any changes?
Good question. In fact, it might be better to go through the chair to feedback from the IAB.
Well, I'm happy to provide any feedback on the IAB from its previous meeting if we don't have any other report coming.
No, sorry, I think we're slightly at cross purposes. The property investment strategy was designed to require certain procedures to be followed before any investments were made. The IAB is the body that actually does the sort of detailed work of looking at every
potential purchases.
But if there are proposals to amend the strategy, to amend the process, that's something which I would have thought this committee, with a scrutiny hat on, would very much want to see to make sure that they're not removing all the protections, if you like.
Or are we helping by reviewing it? I can't tell what.
No, because after all, it was in a sense our document.
Well, I think that we're looking at the property investment strategy, which also will embrace how it's done as well as looking at the model purchasing.
So, Chairman, at the moment, sitting here, I'd say that there isn't an intention. There's no intention to change the way we're doing it. But we're looking at widening the strategy in terms of what we are going to be investing in.
Yeah. So that would need a certain amendment. For example, market rented housing is something which is not in there at the moment. If you wanted to do that, a proposal would come forward to amend the existing document.
I'm very anxious that Mark Merriweather does come to this meeting to present on the investment strategy. It's a question of timing and whether we can put it into the next meeting. Because we're in danger of having so many items that we won't be able to do justice to them all. But it sounds as if we ought to be bringing this investment strategy.
Chairman, the intention is November, but bearing in mind the lead-in time, there's very little time really to get a strategy reviewed in that depth. So it may be very much a draft that we get in November to be finalised. First opportunity after
All right,
that.
well, can I suggest again that we leave this to agenda planning, and if I think it's worthwhile, I don't want to bring it if it's not worthwhile. So can we again leave it to the agenda planning, leave it to me and to Joan to decide on whether it's right to bring it to the meeting at that particular time.
Yes.
And we'll try and balance the things that we've got before us. Okay. Yasmin, and what else do we need to do? We need to go on to section B and C, don't we?
Yes, these section B and C are just for your information, for your reference. So I'll update section B as the budget strategy working group progresses. Section C is to keep track of the recommendations this committee's made. So in the November meeting, you'll see listed there the recommendations that have been made this evening and how they are progressing. So those are for your information to make sure we don't lose track of value this committee's added.
Okay, and then that continues over the page on page 90 as well.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then page 91.
So yeah.
Oh, that's just criteria.
That's criteria.
That's actually an important thing for all members of the committee to read and reread occasionally.
It is, yes, to be aware of the criteria for your. And then that's followed by the executive forward programme.
So that's page 93 on through to 95, 96. So if there are any items on there, we've talked of car parking strategy, which is just getting going, and which will need to come to a meeting at some point.
I think that's the main one for this committee to be concerned with in terms of the executive forward programme.
Okay. Were there any other items that we discussed today that we said we wanted to put in? We said the car parking strategy, but that's further out than the next month. Brightwell's review, we wanted that as a standing item, I think, didn't we? We said we ought to have Brightwell's as a standing item, even if there's very, very little to say, and that may change.
That's wrapped up in the income generation standing item.
Okay, can we make sure then that income generation always includes a comment on Brightwell's, please?
Yeah.
Okay. Item from Robin on sickness, we said that we would bring that to the next meeting, didn't we?
Yep.
But that's part of the minutes. Can we have that as part of the minutes follow-up, section C or something, and we specifically as a feedback from the minutes of last time, rather than elevating it to an item all of its own. But the staff survey.
It was from the performance report.
Well, that's true. Yes, that's
so there were two things that I've got. One was the staff survey item. We did also have a question around the staff sickness. I think some of that had been resolved by seeing the split between short-term and long-term in this report, but I think you were still interested to get an update on that in more general, whether you want to pick that up as part of the next performance report. That's up to the committee.
Well, I think the staff survey does need to come, Jerry.
Just that I think I also read in here somewhere that we're going to be looking at churn at some point.
That's
and so if we sort of tie those in together, well, it would make sense, wouldn't it? We want to understand what it is that, why staff aren't turning up sometimes and or why they're leaving after a short period, whatever.
So, Chairman, exactly right. There's a general item already on general turnover, so I can bring that item, and then perhaps a separate item on the staff survey.
I think we do need to see the staff survey, but I think at this point, given that it's a fairly good staff survey, I think it's a fairly high level, rather than going into great detail, assuming that it's a good report. So would members be happy on that? Because I think we're going to otherwise be running out of time. Is there anything else that we've not covered? Any or yes? Well, I think that would be we've fed that in. Sorry, we're just talking about the quality of the data into your report, David, that we discussed at the end. And you might want to make sure that we are updated that it is okay. Can you feedback? Maybe just an item you could just, would it be possible for you to circulate to members by email your thoughts on that. Would that be another way of covering that?
Yep, that's
Just to
fine.
convince us?
Yeah.
Okay, that might be a thought. Okay, thank you. I think that concludes then item 12, the committee's work programme. So for the recommendation, we invite consider work programme. I think we've done everything there, have we not? Which effectively brings us to the end of the meeting from a webcast point of view. So I'd ask them that we want to now move into exempt. So are we happy to move into exempt session pursuant to Procedure Rule 20 and everything that I outlined on regarding that? Are we okay to do that?
Agreed.
Agreed, okay, so let's turn the webcast off.
Bear with me 1 second.
Okay, thank you.